because it's 4 o'clock in London now, and after this, my answer's here. Unless there's anything really pressing, I would like to go and rest. But let me deal with a couple of points that came up. One was from, I think it's Rowan, artificial construct. That Nigeria is an artificial construct. The point about the artificial construct has everything to do with Berlin. You don't have the equivalent of people sitting around a table, drawing lines in the shaping of countries in a way that deliberately disregards what they know to be lines of affinity, such that a line is drawn between the Yorubas of the Republic of Benin and the Yorubas in what is now Nigeria. This is deliberate, conscious mangling with a view to control. That is one dimension of the artificiality. It's not that they did not know that the languages were the same when they were drawing those borders. We did the same as far as the state boundaries, even within Nigeria, where the military would deliberately draw lines across clans or tribes within the Igbo space, within the Yoruba space, within parts of the north, that will leave some outside of the line and some inside of the line. That is the artificial construct, where you're sitting around a table in the cold light of day, not in the heat of war. In the cold light of day, you're drawing up your pen and you're pulling out your lines and say, we'll draw the boundary here. So please, there's no equivalence as far as the countries in Africa is concerned. They are artificial. The other aspect of the artificial of Nigeria is what I referred to earlier, which was the secret treaty that was drawn up by which the Islamic strip across the north was deliberately brought in. The British had now established by 1898 that the 1900 they had declared a protectorate over southern Nigeria, over the Christian parts. They now entered into a special arrangement to bring in what we now know to be the caliphates, because that area was supposed to go to France. That is artificiality in action. Deliberate conscious, knowing that to go and combine Islamic territories with Christian territories, there was no other strategic purpose. There was no resources in that northern Nigeria space that can rationalize the decision to now bring that territory within the Nigeria, except to create what we now have, which is the internal division and conflict that enables the control and the resources to be enjoyed at leisure. So that's the answer to anybody saying that all nations are artificial. Let's just say that some are more artificial than others. And the countries, Nigeria, a prime example, right across Africa, whether it's South Sudan, North Sudan, artificiality, sitting around the table and drawing the boundaries. The other point was AIG, are African leaders conspiring with the Brits? The reality, somebody touched on it earlier, all political orders have winners and losers. Even as the vast majority of Nigerians are complaining right now, they are, of course, winners who will conspire with those who will put them in power in order to enjoy what they would not otherwise be entitled to enjoy. So yes, there have always been conspiracies between some leaders, against their peoples. Obi's point about they came without support, please don't say that. When you understand the real history, you would not say that.
Okay.
that as if we invited them in. Heavens no. What happened was that taking advantage of some of the people who had been unfortunately caught up in the slave trade, I explained this earlier, as part of their so-called liberation, those ones were now used as pilots to come in. Nobody invited them. It was people like the Ajayi Crowthers were now co-opted into, unbeknown to them, they did not know the larger project. But what they found was that they were told that their people were ungodly, and this is what had brought the suffering of the slave trade to the land. They were now converted to the true gospel. And now, with genuine interest or genuine commitment, seeking to convert their people to what they thought was a pure faith, not knowing that faith was being used for political purposes to facilitate colonization. This is what comes out in the new book, A Slave Ship Called Jesus, how genuine believers were manipulated for ulterior purposes. But it's nonsense to suggest that we Africans, put up an advertising board and say, please come along, we need you over here. That was not the case. It was their agenda they were pursuing, and they pursued it by looking for the weak spots within the country, looking particularly amongst those that they had first captured or enslaved, and then so-called liberated them, who were now beholden to them, and were now made empowered in the course of the colonial project. Nobody invited them.
I don't want to interrupt you actually, but what I'm saying is not my opinion. It's exactly what happened. So I'll give you the very first example. The first colony in Nigeria is Lagos, 1861. Oba Dosumu and Oba Akintoye. Oba Akintoye actually invites the British so he can usurp his uncle and enter the crown. Of course, he had no idea of the larger British project, but the British also had the idea of coming to come and remove slavery and abolish slavery. But then he did invite the British, and they came, supported him, and he became Oba of Lagos. Like, it's facts. It actually pains me as well, but I think it's very important to acknowledge this part of our history, because we also see these people in real time, in the present, that are still selling us out to all these international organizations. So let's acknowledge that and let's move forward. Do you understand?
That's not correct. That's not correct.
Wait, hold on. Yeah, that's not correct. Wait, everybody, hold on. Obi, true question. Kind of generally, but I know. I want Mr. Dele to just give his point of view on that, or whatever you want. But you're our guest, so
yeah. Well, once you put a contrary point out there, you are arguing, even if you deny that you're arguing. It is an argument, and arguments have to be dealt with facts. The British did not sail from England to come and help Akintoye, or Akintoye sent a request for them to come, sent a request to England for them to come and help him. They were in Abeokuta. That's where their presence began. That was their first base. That is the reason why the elites of Yoruba land, the ones who've actually made it to the presidency, are all Egba people, because that was the weak point.
Correct.
Of entry. And using Abeokuta as a base, the British strategy was always to take offshore islands. Hong Kong, Cape Town, Lagos, because it gives them a physical base. They're not going to work off there were no sort of aircraft carriers in those days, etc., that you could just station offshore. You needed a base, and the offshore islands were the most secure. So as part of their strategic agenda was always to take that island. You then have to manufacture the excuse, and often the conflicts were manufactured. You then come in and exploit that and side with one, change the balance of power. And of course it will be dressed up that, he invited us in. So please, let's...
I'm sorry, Mr. Dele. I don't want to interrupt you, but he sent a letter to the British in 1850. I can read that letter that Akintoye sent to the British in 1850. So in 1850, he failed. He tried to retake Lagos through Badagry. He failed. He specifically reached out to the governor of Cape Coast and sent a letter in December 1850 requesting for British aid. The then foreign minister actually now with Queen Victoria, asked Samuel Ajayi Crowther, what do you think about this? And he says, go in, because if you can do that, you can Christianize that entire area. The letter goes like this. My humble prayer, this is Akintoye, writing to the British in December 1850. This is, again, check any archives there. My humble prayer is that you would take Lagos under your protection, that you would plant the English flag there, and that you would re-establish me on my rightful throne at Lagos and protect me under my flag. And with your help, I promise to enter into a treaty to abolish the slave trade and to establish and carry on lawful trade, especially with English merchants. I'm not speaking on an opinion here. Do you understand what I mean? This is kind of what I do for fun.
I think you already talked about that, though.
Can I deal with that? Yeah. You do like to jump in. I always like to listen to people without jumping in, but you jumped in.
I'm sorry about that, actually, but okay. I just wanted to...
You just got to allow for the fact that people may know what you're already talking about and have taken that into account in what they say. At page 68 of Fatherless, that very letter, the full version, is quoted. And the preamble, let me give you the context. It reads, when Kosoko seized the crown of Lagos from King Akintoye in 1845, Abeokuta was where the former king took refuge. From here, Townsend, who never shied away from political entanglement, was able to enlist the support of the British government for Akintoye's reinstatement, leading Beecroft to report again in 1851. I've been informed by a person who was at Lagos that the massacre in 1845 was awful. He exterminated the whole of his uncle's family, about 2,000, and the lagoon was a pest house for weeks, owing to the dead carcasses in it. I then go on to say, such deeply felt grievances were always useful recruiting aids in the quest to extend British influence. With some encouragement, and hear this very carefully, and more than a little letter writing support from Beecroft, the deposed King Akintoye is reported to have made a formal appeal for help from the British to regain his throne in Lagos. I, King Akintoye of Lagos, salute you and your great queen and government, and I wish you all happiness, peace and prosperity. May God bless your great queen and grant her a long and happy reign. I rejoice very much to see the day which has brought you, the representative of England, to this town, particularly at this time when I am surrounded by dangers. Indeed, I very much need your assistance, and I'm reduced to the necessity of begging your aid against an enemy who has seized my throne and kingdom. My humble prayer to you, sir, the representative of the English government, which is well known is ever ready and desirous to protect the defenseless, to obtain redress for the grievance of their injured, and to check the triumphs of wickedness, is that you would take Lagos under your protection, that you would plant the English flag there, and that you would re-establish me on my rightful throne at Lagos and protect me under my flag. And with your help, I promise to enter into a treaty with England to abolish the slave trade at Lagos and to establish and carry on a lawful trade, especially with English merchants. Please, when we read these things, let's make allowance for what's really going on behind the scenes. Don't look at the surface narrative, because Akintoye was not versed in the English language to be writing that kind of thing. He was assisted by Beecroft, and they had their agenda. So let's look a bit deeper.
So whoever is that, let's Mr. Dele, sorry, but let's continue.
Yes, I was just making the point. It's very important. Things are not always as they appear. We should know that, even from what goes on today. Look at the Iraq War, weapons of mass destruction. That was an excuse, we now know, for the real agenda, which the commitment had already been made, we're going to attack Iraq. And yet you need a different narrative to cover the story. And if you follow the headline narrative, the official narrative, you get lost in the understanding and the analysis. So nobody invited them. It was agenda, conquest, and this was just part of the process. It's been a joy to join you all. I look forward to joining you again, but it is almost 4:20 in London now. And,
Mr. Dele, can I ask you one question before you leave, please? Just one question. Just a quick one.
Wait.